Welcome to this week's podcast, In Search of Purpose with me, Sal Hanvey. Today is Adrian Dunbar podcast day. It was amazing. We caught up on loads of different things, like him growing up in Fermanagh and then Skillen, moving to London in the middle of the Troubles in the 80s, 1980, the year I was born actually. And also we talked about line of duty, and do we find out who H is? You'll just have to watch and see, or listen and see, depending. The podcast is available on Podbean, YouTube, and different various platforms, and I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. Hello and welcome to In Search of Purpose with Sal Hanvey. Hello, Adrian. How are you today?
Very well, thanks. Not too bad.
What are you up to?
Well, we're doing a new series of Line of Duty, so we're all locked up, locked down, just going to work, and we can't really do a pile else.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
are you looking forward to it? It's going to be
lines,
and I'm sure that it's going to be different this time that you're not particularly used to. So, how is that all going?
It's just a bit annoying, to tell you the truth, and all that kind of stuff. Obviously we have to stick to the rules, and we are sticking to the rules. We're getting temperature tested every morning, and then tested COVID tested every other day, every 2 or 3 days. And, we have to wear masks all the time, hand sanitation and all that stuff. So it's just puts time on the day. But, other than that, when we come to do the scenes, we're usually a bit of a distance apart anyway. So that kind of works out. But it's tricky. And we can't really go out into the city, of course. That's kind of frowned upon, and getting home is going to be difficult as well. We won't be able to go home as much as we did, because obviously that requires more testing and special masks for flying and all that type of thing. So it's an encumbrance, and it's kind of annoying, but we're getting the work done. So that's the main thing.
Exactly, and there'll be a lot of people who'll be eagerly waiting and anticipating the return of Line of Duty. Obviously, it's the program that you're most recognised for at the present time, and I think probably slightly delayed due to the COVID. I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, it probably would be released reasonably soon in comparison to, say, next year now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was going to be sort of the centrepiece of the BBC's autumn schedule, but we had to stop shooting in March like everybody else. So we've only picked up a few weeks ago. So we'll be finished by, I suppose, the end of November, and then it'll go into post and all the rest of it. So I suppose sometime maybe May, June of next year it might appear, but I don't know. It's hard to know how quickly they can kind of process the whole thing. I know there'll be a big audience waiting for it anyway.
There sure will. And with regards to a bit of the background, I'm sure people will obviously know, a lot of people will know who you are and what you do, but just to kind of get a bit of a background on the go, Adrian, can you just tell us a bit about where you grew up and what you became to do?
Yeah, so I grew up in Enniskillen, and and in County Fermanagh, and I spent all my formative years there, all through the 1960s, which was great. It was a lovely place to grow up, very beautiful town, and a beautiful county and so forth, and very close to the coast. So that was kind of, used to do a lot of fishing, a lot of stuff on the lake, and it was a really good community feel about the whole thing. And then, of course, things happened at the end of the 1960s, and the communities became polarized because of the conflict, the war. And we, at the same time, we moved to Portadown in County Armagh to the place called the Gavahi Road. So for about 1976, I was there, and that was a different thing because it was much more sectarian. I'd never come across kind of that sort of thing in Fermanagh really, or in Enniskillen. So, but I came across it there. That kind of that sectarian thing, and the whole town of Portadown shifted during that period. People moved from one side of the town to the other, and so it was created this nationalist ghetto really in the northwest of the town. And so we lived there for about 5-6 years. It was a pretty difficult period. There was a lot of random deaths and shootings and so forth, and rioting and stuff like that. So, but we went back to Enniskillen, thankfully, in about 76, and got back to a more kind of normal life. And then, so went to school in Enniskillen. School wasn't really, I was always interested in music and, other things. So I kind of was a bit distracted about school. So I didn't really concentrate on, I learned things, but I wasn't really good at exams or anything like that. So I started playing in bands. I had my own little 3-piece kind of country band.
I did not know that.
Yeah, when I was still in school. And, and then I left. I got a job working in an abattoir in the summer holidays. And so I kept that job on and kept the band on. And then I got a job with another band called Frank Chisholm. He was a kind of Elvis Presley impersonator.
I met Frank many times.
Huh?
I met him many times with my dad. My dad would have photographed him back in the day. And
oh yeah, no, I'd say he did all right. Yeah, that was great. That was a great gig, and we went to New York in '79, which was really interesting with that. And and then at that stage too, I started. A cousin of mine asked me, did I want to kind of help with the kind of local amateur dramatic society and with the lights and things like that. So I helped with the lights, and then the next year they asked me would I play a part, and I played a part in this play. And a few people said, you're quite good at that. You might want to try and do an audition for a drama school. And luckily enough for me, there was a few people around who helped me get an audition. And I went across to London. I did the audition, and as luck would have it, I managed to scrape in, and went back to Enniskillen. I got a job in the local kind of sports centre, kind of mowing the grass for the summer. So, and then I knew I was going to go to the Barbican. That was about 1980. I went to the Barbican Centre in the City of London in 1980, and at that particular time, there was a big buzz, in the place because the Thatcher and the Tories had realised that if you sold off council houses to people who had been living and renting them for a long time, if you sold them off cheap, then those people would buy them, and the next thing they would want to do things to them. And it stimulated this huge growth in the economy of building. And then the City of London was doing hugely well at the time. So there was an incredible sort of energy in the city around the early 80s that was, built upon the froth of the City of London. And we were right in the middle of it all. So we couldn't help but being swept up in all that. And I did 3 years at drama school, the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. And at the end of that, kind of came back to Belfast to work, at the Lyric and do things at the BBC. And that kind of helped that was good for a while. And then, I realized I needed to get to London. So I did a piece for the BBC, and I wrote to some agents in London, and one of them came out, and then I flew over to London, and then I went round and saw some, and one guy took me on, a guy called Michael Foster, and then I stayed with him for some time, and I just kind of started doing jobs from there, and some years were quite good, and it's just been a job and actor really ever since. And in the meantime, I kind of wrote things and I directed things, and so I've been kind of building up, doing all kinds of different things. And sometimes, when your career is going really well, you're doing lots of telly, and then you might get bored with it and you want to go back to the theatre. And I did a lot of that. I did a lot of moving through the different mediums, if you like, bits of film, and then TV, and then the theatre, and directing and writing. So I've been doing lots of different things since then, and it's the variety really of stuff that is kind of, that I like. I don't, some people just want to do one thing and be really good at it, which is great. And, but I've got lots of things that I like to do. So I've got a really varied sort of life, creative life, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it is, because I would be quite similar in that regard. And that was one of the questions that I had for you. It was actually, is there a particular area that you feel most comfortable in, or is it literally the diversified nature of your work that keeps you going?
Yeah, exactly. So it is, it's the variety of things that I like, because I I don't like to put too much pressure on any one thing. So it's good to take the pressure off everything by being able to move through different disciplines.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm working with my friend Nick Roth. The two of us have set up a kind of multidiscipline art company that's using poetry and dance and acting, filmmaking, and all kinds of music in particular, and mixing all these things up and finding ways of creating new pieces, if you like. Mm-hmm. We have a piece. We took T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland and split it into 4 voices. Nick wrote some wonderful new music, and I found the earliest colour footage of London in the BFI. And so we put those 3 things, those 3 elements together, and you have a really interesting evening and a real insight, I believe, into the poem itself. And we're hoping to take that on a tour. And we've also started to organise a Samuel Beckett Festival with Liverpool University and Notre Dame in the US. That's going to happen next July. And we have the subject of that is confinement, which is based on a new book by James Little called Confinement and Beckett. And so that's kind of apposite. So that's going to happen in Liverpool next year. These are just other projects of kind of, the day job. And so I'm interested in, and I'm interested in music, obviously, and Irish music in particular. But all kinds of music, jazz and, everything. Be interested in everything. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I love my jazz. I love my Irish as well. Have you any particular favourite artists that you like to mention?
Well, of course, yeah. Well, there's lots of people I could mention. Sadly, our great friend Artie McGlynn passed away recently, and, I was a great fan of him and Nolly Casey and the work that he did very early on with Cathal Hayden. Earlo Leonard, of course, is a great singer and the work that he does. And, and all the girls up in Donegal and the Gaeltacht up there, Maria O'Donnell and, and Trina and, Dahi Sproul. And, there's a huge amount of people, up in that area, and the Begleys, of course. And, you could just go on all day about, John Carty and, Matt Malloy, and, there's so many people, the Dervish guys, who I'm great friends with. I work with them. So there's, but the music is, the traditional music is something that survived,
Mhm.
amazingly intact, whereas the language, of course, found it difficult to survive because for obvious reasons. But the tunes, the tunes have survived as a great document of, of emotion, if you like. So all that is there, and it's free to be downloaded by simply listening to it. And so I do, there's lots of, and there's lots of new players coming along, of course. It doesn't stop. That's the great thing about it. It's a bit like, the Jajuka in North Africa, and talk about, the fact that, their music is being played for 2,000 years, and that, any time of the day and night, someone somewhere is playing it. Well, you might say the same thing in Ireland. The music really hasn't stopped. But
I know.
there's always a couple of boys up at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I know. I actually 1 year, but maybe 10 years ago, I won the Down Fla singing.
Oh,
Um,
did you?
yeah,
Yeah.
but I didn't actually go on to do the Ulster because I was going back to England. I was doing the studying over there, and the
Oh,
clash.
that's a pity.
I know, but I did end up going on to make an album. Actually, with somebody you might know, Michael Sands, from the Sands family.
Oh,
The
yeah,
then
absolutely.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
lots of other people. But him you would know now. So yeah, I wrote an album but 5 or 6 years ago called Nostalgia Queen. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
do a lot of my own stuff as well. I love
Great,
playing
great.
music, but it really is something that I just like to do as enjoyment purely. Um, I did some support gigs with Jules Holland and stuff. I opened for him on the UK and Irish tour. I did the Irish dates, but I really, really enjoyed it. But I don't want to go touring. I don't really want to live the life of, session players and going around. I really love playing on my own, sort of like off my own bat and doing my own thing with my people when I really, really enjoy it, rather than seeking out as a career, if you understand me.
Yeah, no, I do. It's very difficult, the kind of on the road thing. I think you have to be born into that. And no, I couldn't do that. I like to kind of get to a place and stop for a while. But I've heard musicians. It's like, musicians. They get inured, if you like, to the road, but that's only because they don't know what it's like to stay in one place for a little while.
That's
And if they were allowed to stay in one place for a little while and play, that might, I heard Van Morrison, saying that, one of the difficult things about being a musician these days is that there aren't any residencies left.
mm,
In other words, there isn't anywhere that kind of says, right, you'll come here and you'll play 5 nights a week, 3 hours a night for 3 months. And, we put the band up and we do this, we do that. He said, because when you got a band together and you were 3 months in a place, by the end of the gig, you were a really tight band. And so when you went on the road, you had really something to say.
mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. But no, I don't think I could do the stuff that people like Brian Kennedy do. The solo artists, just in the car with their guitar, showing up at a venue, hoping that the stage manager will be there when you knock on the back door to let you in, going into a very cold, empty venue, doing some kind of a sound check, and keeping your fingers crossed that a few people show up, and then finding out where you're staying that night, getting something to eat. It's pretty bleak, actually, when you think about it. It's a really tough gig, and I really don't know how those artists who are on their own, I really admire them.
I know. I did it. You said it, and it just reminded me of a time I did that in Florida. You're playing a lot of Irish bars, and you're playing a lot like that to put you up to get you your flights. You go over and you stay with them and stuff. But when you're asked to play Whiskey in the Jar for the 100th time, it does get a bit monotonous and a bit tedious and a bit, you get a bit
Yeah.
by the whole situation to the point where you're almost ready to move on, essentially. But there is that romantic notion of being on the road, and that kind of feeling of never settling, never letting the dust settle, never letting get under your feet. You just keep moving, and it's just not something that I particularly relish, ongoing.
Yeah, yeah. No, we're well out of that, as they say.
Yeah. And what about with regards to, obviously, you're in not lockdown, but essentially because of the work that you're doing, I understand the dynamic of how you have to get on testing and so on. And you're obviously working away on a lot of projects. So you're keeping busy, obviously, anyway, Adrian, with regards to all that. So at least you've that going on.
Oh yeah, no, I think most people are trying to stay in their creative head, and keep busy. I mean, I think like everybody, I tore into a lot of stuff at the start. The first 2 months of, fabulous weather and all that. I did a lot of work in the garden and lots of stuff like that. But then because then I thought everything was going to last for about 5 or 6 weeks. But, when you realize it's going to go on for months, you suddenly lose you run out of steam. And so I ran out of steam a bit and kind of started buying cases of Crema and bottles of Cassis and gave in, really. But now that we're back, it's great because it's keen to salvage something of the year, because there was a whole number of things that I was, like everybody else, there were a number of things that I was supposed to do, and they all got cancelled. So to get something done at the end of the year is great, before Christmas. That'll be good.
Yeah, exactly. And any spoilers or anything? Do we get to find out who Hitch is this time round? And can we probably ask that every season? It's probably ridiculous now.
Yeah. I don't think the Hicks thing is ever going to resolve itself, to tell you the truth. I don't see that. I'm not sure whether that's ever going to happen. But you never know. Jed could surprise us yet.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. I've been watching it very keen. My partner, he does special effects in a lot of things. Not
All
on
right.
not on Line of Duty now, but he's done a lot with regards to the obviously years of Game of Thrones years. And he's on that new movie Northman, the new
Oh,
one with
yeah.
Nicole Kidman and Ethan Hawke and Björk as well.
Yeah.
But I understand how it is extremely uncertain time, but it's about getting back into the industry and trying to make it work because it can't stop forever. And there's so many seasons of things that I'm really eagerly anticipating the return of, and it's just, you just think to yourself, oh no, that's another year before that comes out. But it'll just be so exciting when it does. And I've watched Line of Duty the whole way through, actually very reluctantly. It was actually Jack who'd tried to get me into it. And I'll be totally honest with you, Adrian, the first couple of episodes, I wasn't particularly hooked. And he says, no, give it time. He'd watched the first season and he made me watch it with him again so I could watch it again. I've watched every episode. I sometimes binge watched it. It was absolutely brilliant. And you're brilliant at it.
It's a great old show. It's a great show. We're all delighted with it. And we just hope it keeps going. But we don't know. We just don't know. We might all end up being shot. Just don't know what comes to.
And what about with regards to the theatre side of things? You were saying there a while back that you were going to be working on something. Is that T.S. Eliot?
No, that's it. No, I mean the live gig is over for the present.
Okay.
So we have to say goodbye to that. That's just not going to happen for some time now. But we can you just have to hope that we can get a vaccine and we can get crowds of people back into the theatre again, because you can't do theatre with people spaced out. That doesn't work either.
I know that. I actually did a podcast a while back with Tim McGarry, and he was saying that a lot of musicians are able to do Zoom, even though it doesn't reciprocate the same way and the energy is lost. Essentially, you're still trying to create music together collectively but separately and remotely. But he says that one thing for sure is that when it comes to the comedian side of things, you can't do comedian kitchens, because you need the energy massively in order to be able to draw that back, so that the reciprocation and the communication is live, and the gaps will actually be massively felt to the point where the energy won't be the same, as you well know.
Yeah, well, I mean, the live gig is over and the Zoom gig is over because they really don't work. I mean, it's a good way of just kind of describing something or talking to somebody, or but really, you need people in the room together for the creative process to work. Really, it's all right. You can get certain things done, and you can agree on things, and you can have chats about stuff. But it's not ultimately really, really creative. And people have tried to do things. Everybody was trying to do monologues and poems and all that kind of thing, and it's great up to a point. But there's no there's no transference, and that's a problem because we're in the we're in the performance game, and performance we need. The live gig for performance.
Exactly, I know. And as well as that, obviously you've got the likes of the Opera House and the Lyric Theatre, especially the Lyric Theatre, with it having been done up. You want to get people back in there, and it's obviously going to be quite a long time before that happens, but I suppose it's just working within the other mediums at the moment then.
Yeah, I think basically people have to go off and do other stuff. They have to find ways of remaining creative, whichever way they can. The buildings are just they're only buildings. They're going to have to find ways of utilizing the buildings in a way that maybe makes sense, that maybe, earn some money for the building. I don't know, but it's just going to be really difficult to do anything else because, well, try and get insurance for that.
Yeah.
Just not going to happen.
Yeah, I know, that is the point. And when you look back on the whole kind of the career in which you've had with regards to up until say March time, is there one particular memory and sort of moment that you think to and you think, that's why I do what I do?
Well, there's lots and lots of things, of course, over the years that and different types of things, and meeting certain people or doing certain plays or being involved with certain films. And, I've had a lot of good stuff. And but I suppose Hear My Song, a film that I wrote and starred in, that was a great buzz when we did that back in, I think, 1990 that happened. And I really enjoyed that. That was like, that was great fun. It was just seriously good fun from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
So looking back, I would say Hear My Song was probably one of the best things and happiest times.
And Hear My Song, is that the song Hear My Song?
Yes, it's a film.
Yes, right. Yeah.
It's a film, and the song is Hear My Song. Yeah, that song.
And that was in 1990. That's right. And that was a
91. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
are you glad you moved over to England? And obviously, I'm sure you are. But did you miss home when you were away for that period of time?
I didn't miss home. I didn't miss leaving Northern Ireland in 1980. It was a huge relief, like a lot of people, to get out of a place that was so living on its nerves and the stress of the place, especially if you'd been in bands traveling about. You were very aware, especially traveling late at night, you're very aware of the dangers that the road presented. And so getting out of it, that was pretty significant. Going back and then after drama school, so I had this period of drama school, and going back to Belfast was great because, Belfast is is my home city. It's just been, a city I've always loved. The people are great, and I've always got on really well with everybody and done some great work here in Belfast. So I was always happy to come back, but then glad to get back to London again and get, in those 3 years, of course, I'd become very enamored with London, and of course I knew quite a bit about London, being somebody who's interested in history as well. So I was in the old city, and I loved that part of London. I still love that part of London.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to get back, and I got back, and I've been there ever since. And it's one of the world's great cities. It will remain, one of the world's great cities. You know, things aren't looking great at the minute with Brexit and all that. That's not. We don't know how that particular psychodrama is going to play itself out. But we just have to wait and see. London is one of the places that didn't vote for Brexit, and there tends to be a kind of more liberal left-wing bias in the City of London, especially amongst the working classes.
Mm-hmm.
And in the south of London, we're very aware. The people I live with and live amongst are very aware that it's a kind of narrow band of English nationalism that seems to be driving this particular project of taking us away from Europe. So it's very sad in many ways, because London in particular has been hugely enriched by its place within the EU and the connection of the Eurostar and the tunnel. We have loads of French people and Germans and Italians and Belgians and Dutch, and they've all come to the city because now we have the train link. It's very easy. And they've all opened their shops and restaurants, and, when they brought their sensibilities to the city, a European sensibility. And, we're all very kind of sad, and certainly they are very sad that we're turning our back on the wonderful peace project that the EEC really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it is. It is quite tragic and quite an uncertain time. And you were saying about 1980 and moving away. That was the year I was born in Belfast. So I was literally born into the midst of it. But you also mentioned earlier about growing up in Enniskillen and how it was lovely in the 70s and stuff. Like my family, my dad's side are from Brookborough. I don't know if you know that, but it's
yes, I do.
yeah, and it's just literally a hop, skip, and a jump from Enniskillen. And I can remember the summers were so long and so warm. Maybe it's just this nostalgic association and you only remember the bright days. But I can remember skipping up and down that street, literally a street. And if you go back to Brookborough now, which I do, have friends there, and it's exactly the same as it was back then. And I absolutely love that, the old wee sweet shop. And there was actually a sweet shop in the middle of the town, but friends of mine, Miriam and David, and I live in the sweet shop house. So that's quite nostalgic, going into theirs for a cup of tea, and I'm not getting any sweets measured out for me. But I do love that kind of old school way of, it's so slow paced, and that slow paced nature is something that's quite lost, I think. And, maybe when you're in London, for example, you don't really get that sense of nostalgia or association with those old ways as much, do you?
Well, of course, London is full of nostalgia because it's, very, very old place. And, there are areas of it that haven't really changed for 200 and 300 years. And you can come across them and you can find yourself, wandering through all that. But then again, I first came to London when I was about 20. So I've lived in London 40 years. Mm-hmm. So therefore, if you think back to when you're 10, and I think back to when I'm 20, that distance, I see myself, that's where I kind of, my youth was in Enniskillen, my childhood and so forth, but then my teenage years were on the road. But, I kind of grew up in London, really. So I'm kind of London Irish, like a lot of people are, who've kind of lived 2/3 of their life in the city. So, that's kind of where I belong now. I know that city pretty well. I know it inside out. But of course, I also have a place on the west coast. I have a place in North County Leitrim,
Beautiful.
uh, near Bundoran,
Lovely.
which is an area I used to go to. We used to go there um, when we were in Portadown. We used to go down to Warren Point,
Hmm.
and my granny had a caravan there. And then they put a caravan in Bundoran, and we used to go down to Bundoran. When we came back to Enniskillen, then we'd go down to Bundoran or Rossnala or Mullaghmore, and in around that area for our holidays. So I ended up buying a place down there, and I get there quite a bit,
Lovely.
and that's kind of represents kind of being on holiday and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. That is, it's good. It's good to have that balance. But one thing that you definitely haven't lost from moving to England is your accent, Adrian. That's definitely still very strong.
Yeah, my accent is pretty strong, but that's because I spend so much time in Ireland.
Yes.
So it's not like the old days where you kind of, you went away and that was
Mm.
it. And so I've been back and forth. And, I spent 3 months, 4 months doing line of duty here in Belfast. I could be down in Dublin doing 2 months of a series down there. So, and then I'll go and spend kind of time in North County Leitrim or Fermanagh or whatever. So I've kind of been at home kind of, quite a bit actually, over the years. Every year I'd be doing something at home. And yeah, so that's kind of allowed me to hang on to my accent, I think.
There's a song, I don't know if you've heard of it before, called Missing You. It was Jimmy McCarthy originally, but then
Oh
Christine,
yeah,
and
yeah, I know.
I love it. I don't know if you like it, but I've done a cover of that one, and it's about,
Yeah, I know the song. Yeah,
you might be able to resonate with it slightly, in the sense that it is about being from here, moving to there, coming
yeah,
back.
yeah. It was written about the kind of that group of young people who had to leave Ireland mid 1980s when there was a kind of a depression or a slump, an economic slump, and they all came over. And of course, what they didn't realize, a lot of those young people coming from the south, in particular, that they were walking into a scenario whereby, they were suddenly going to be identified as Irish, and being identified as Irish was, you know, not a good thing at
No.
that point because there was lots of stuff happening, and it's difficult in London. London's the most brutalized of all the Irish communities. They tend to stick together in lots of other cities. There's very, very good Irish communities in London and or in Manchester and Liverpool, Glasgow, and across in the US. But London was always difficult because, the police and the authorities did not like to see any, if you like, gatherings, large gatherings of Irish people in the city of London. Um, so, London was tough. London was tough, and people could say things. And that Jimmy McCarthy song is trying to identify a little bit of what it felt like to be in London at that time. Very
Yeah,
good writer, Jimmy. Very
be
good.
amazing. Beware, you're a Paddy, you're a Biddy, you're a Mick, good for nothing but stacking the brick.
All that stuff.
It's, yeah, it was. I love singing it, and I love getting whoever I'm singing it to sing in the chorus. It's quite nice. And then
Yeah.
I only did 5 years in England. It sounds like it was a sentence, but it wasn't. I lived in Devon, down in Devon, Cornwall border in Dartmoor, and that was an experience. That's a
Oh
beautiful
yeah.
place. I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
you've been down to Dartmoor, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, I've never been down there yet. I look forward to that. That'll be nice.
I think you'll enjoy it. There's a real Celtic nature to Cornwall. Um,
Yeah.
it's quite different, Carno, well, it's obviously considered a different entity essentially, but it's a beautiful, rugged, rural landscape with lovely people. So
Yeah.
I had the privilege of living down there for 5 years, so it was really, really nice.
Great.
You know.
Lovely.
And I
Yeah.
just would like to, thank you for taking the time, Adrian, to have a chat with me
That
today.
was all.
I really, really appreciate it. It was great. And
That was all.
keep up
Nice
the
having a
good,
chat.
yeah, exactly. And keep up the good work. That's what I'd like you to do, is keep up the good work. But you will anyway. You don't
Will
need
do. We'll try our best to get back to the lines.
Exactly. Thank you
All
very
right,
much
Sal.
for your time.